This episode is brought to you by Spas and More.
I just believe in the power of healing and restoration. And I know that if we can just come together and speak about the hard things, we can finally begin to heal. So, this is where we heal.
Okay, so welcome to another episode of This Is Where We Heal. Today I am going to do things just a little bit differently. So, in the past, I have had guests that would come on and share about their own journeys, share about the things that they have been learning on their own healing journeys, or the things that they've been learning just about life in general. And I love doing that because it inspires me, but it also, I think, helps us to build our own tools and things like that by just hearing the stories of other people and the ways that they've overcome. And I've also done some Q&As before, which I also really enjoy doing. I love answering questions with people. I am still flattered that people will even care what I have to say, if I'm being perfectly honest. But today I wanted to do something a little differently. I have told my story in the past. I've told about the experiences that I faced when I was younger, the abuse that I went through. I have talked about the assault that I experienced in my early 20s. I have talked about going through divorce. But a question that I get a lot that I realized recently I've never fully talked about in depth is, how did I heal? How did I heal? And I, in some ways, never really knew how to respond to that outside of just like the basic tools that I used for myself. But I I knew it was something that I couldn't just answer in a short answer. And so I wanted to talk about that today as just a way of sharing that with all of you that have asked me many times in a way that's meaningful. Um, I want to start that by saying that my healing journey is just that, like anyone else's, it's a journey. And so I guess the question of how did you heal really doesn't necessarily apply, because I don't know that we're ever really fully healed. I think that our life is just about the process of healing, the process of understanding ourselves, the process of learning and growing from the things that we experience. And I think until the day that our body dies and we meet Jesus again in heaven, I think that's where we will be, in a continual renewal and cycle of healing as we go. And in some ways, that's really beautiful. But speaking of my own journey, I wanted to talk about that because I think it's important to share our experiences, and I think it's important to be honest and real and raw about what that looks like, because there are a lot of misconceptions where healing is such a hot topic these days. And everywhere you look online, you will see people talking about their healing journey and healing, and now I'm healed, and I did this, and you can do this, and if you buy this ebook here, you'll heal this part of your life, and all of those things are really great, and I love that we have resources. But what I don't love is that there's a lack of transparency about what it actually looks like, because, and I've said this on my social media before, but healing isn't pretty. It's hard. And it is a beautiful thing. But it's a process of shedding parts of ourselves that we held on to protect our heart and our soul, and learning to let them go and surrender them to God so that we can then transition into the next season of our lives as a new person. And I have a tattoo on the back of my arm with a butterfly that says rebirth on it, because I have felt like in a lot of ways in my own healing journey, I've been reborn many times. And I love that symbolism too, even just in my own, faith and walk with the Lord, that when we fully surrender to the life that God has for us. We are being reborn in many ways, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. So I want to start with the beginning of my journey, because it wasn't until it was about 2 years ago, really, when it began. And it was about 3 years ago when I left my marriage, and that wasn't where the healing began. In fact, when I left my marriage, I was more lost than I'd ever been. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I didn't feel like I had a purpose anymore. And so a lot of that first year after leaving my marriage, growing up in a Christian home and feeling like divorce was, the unforgivable sin, I felt very alone and empty. And it was only by the grace of God that I really carried through that year, because God's love covered me in a way, and his peace covered me in a way that year that I genuinely didn't feel I deserved, that I genuinely didn't expect. I kind of felt like, this unlovable, unlikable, unworthy person that chose to walk away from a 10-year marriage, even though there was an infidelity, which I felt like was the only excuse to ever leave. And I knew that at that time in my life, that would be a decision that would come with a lot of backlash and potentially a lack of support. And, the people in my life at that time did their best based on their own experiences. And I've learned to understand that, we can only show up for people in the ways that we ourselves have experienced. But my healing journey didn't begin then. My healing journey began about 2 years ago, after that season of just depression and loneliness, and beginning to date again and finding myself in dating situation after dating situation, just rehashing every wound that I'd ever had and never healed. Every wound that I had that was still literally just open. And I was continually exposing myself to hurt after hurt, and rejection after rejection, and abandonment after abandonment, when I still had all of those wounds very much alive in me and that had never been healed. And it was after a situation with someone that, once again, I had poured my heart and soul into, believing that if I just love someone enough, if I just show up for them enough, if I pour all of myself into someone, then I can earn their love. I didn't know then that love isn't something that you earn. Trust is something that you earn. Safety is something that comes with trust being earned. But love is something that should be given freely. And so this person had left me in one of the darkest places of my life, and I didn't understand why. I had given it everything that I had. I had loved to the best of my ability. I had been gracious and understanding and forgiving of all the things that I was being exposed to in this relationship with this person that I knew I didn't deserve, but thinking, well, if I just love enough, if I just give enough, if I'm just gracious enough, if I just keep forgiving, they're going to see that I'm valuable, right? But when that person left me after all of that, I was finally so broken that I had no choice but to take a really honest and hard look at myself and the ways that I had let myself down and the ways that I hadn't protected myself and the ways that I hadn't showed up for myself. Because I was noticing for the first time in my life the pattern of just begging to be chosen, and the pattern of giving too much and overextending myself and pouring into others when I barely had enough to keep going myself. And I realized that while there were many people in the world that were hurting and would continue to hurt people, I was the one letting them come into my life. I was the one allowing them to stay. I was the one that kept literally handing them the knife and letting them stab me in my heart. That was me. That was me. That was the choice that I continued to make. And so the first step in my healing was the acceptance, accepting the reality of the ways that I had let myself down, the ways that I continually, knowingly chose and stayed with people that had proven that they didn't care about me. And I had to go, okay, what part of me doesn't feel worthy of more? What part of me lets these people in my life at all? What part of me feels so worthless that I think that's okay? That I would let people treat me that way when I know I'm not going to treat them that way. And I remember just laying in my bathtub one night, just sobbing. And it was in one of those moments where the reality of everything was really hitting me hard. And I felt so alone and so lonely. And I literally was laying in the bathtub and grabbed my phone. And I thought, I don't want to be here anymore. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. I'm empty. I have nothing left to give. And I Googled the different ways to kill yourself without it hurting, without feeling pain. And two things happened in that moment. The first thing was that it didn't take me to any resources on how to do that. It immediately took me to, a suicide hotline. And then the second thing that happened was I looked up, and on the mirror in my bathroom, my daughter had taped a picture of herself that she colored in class. And so I sat there and I looked at that picture of her, and I realized it will never be so bad that she deserves to lose her mother. And in that same moment, I also realized she also deserves a mother who loves herself. She also deserves a mother who has values, who has boundaries, who protects herself so that she can protect her too. And I knew that I had to be that example, that I had to go back to the little girl in me and take her hand and finally be the one that said, okay, I will protect you from here on out. I will be the one that guards your heart. I will be the one that helps you make choices that spare your heart instead of letting it get broken over and over again. So the first part of my healing journey was truly acceptance. It was facing the reality and acknowledging the places where I had to learn and be that person that stood up for myself and be that person that was strong enough to walk away when I saw that someone wasn't right for me, to be that person that said, you know what, enough is enough, and I deserve more than this, and I will expect more from this, and I will no longer allow people in my heart and my space or in my life that do not treat me in the same ways that I treat them. So that was the first step for me. And I want to be very honest in saying that, when you see people healing online and you see the beautiful reels that they create, and I create reels too, and about my own experience, but it always looks so nice and so, peaceful. And that's just not the reality. The reality is that there were days that I literally didn't want to get out of bed. There were days when I literally laid for hours in my bed. And if I did find a way to get out of the bed, whether to go to the bathroom or eat something or just move my legs, I would just end up on that couch and lay there until it was time to pick up my daughter from school. And of course, now I look back and I realize that that was part of the process too, and that's okay. And so the other part of my healing journey was having grace for myself in a way that I'd never had it before, realizing that God's grace had been covering me up until this point, and now it was my job to carry that same grace for myself, to allow myself to be human, to allow myself to be imperfect, to allow myself to have days where grief just hit me like a tidal wave and days where I actually felt like I had energy, and not to beat myself up for the days that I didn't do much, not to beat myself up for not being productive, but to simply let it be, to simply let myself ride the waves and get through each day however I needed to. Some days I did next to nothing, and some days I felt like I was in a really good place. And the grace to cover that was really honestly transformational for me, because I had always been my worst critic. I had always been really hard on myself, but really gracious towards everyone else. And I realized it was time to turn that back towards me. The third part of my healing was getting very, very clear about what I deserved in relationship and friendship and connection, and knowing it so well that I stopped tolerating anything else. So for me, that was realizing my own tendencies through empathy and love and grace and understanding, and the ways that, though that is beautiful and that's who I am and that's who I should be, but the ways that I had given it in moments where I wasn't necessarily required to. And learning where that line in the sand was for myself. So I got very clear on that. These are the things that I need. These are the things I want. And these are my non-negotiables. And that helped me a lot. It helped me set a standard for myself and my life and for the people that I allowed in it. And from that point on, I got very specific with that. I know that a lot of people who listen to my show are highly empathetic. And the one thing that I want to instill in you is that empathy is absolutely beautiful. Your heart is meant to be soft. Your heart is meant to be kind. You are meant to be loving. That is who you are meant to be. That's who God calls us to be. And there is nothing wrong with you for loving people with everything that you have. There's nothing wrong with you for extending grace. There is nothing wrong with you for having empathy and understanding and compassion for people. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. But you also have to have boundaries, especially as an empathetic person. Because as sad as it is to say, there are a lot of people in this world that do take advantage of that will take advantage of that. And so while you are not required to change who you are required to protect who you are. You are required to understand who you are so that you can protect yourself. Another thing that will be vital is the mindset shift that you have to have in order to move forward in your life. And that is whether you are healing from things from your childhood, or the things that have happened to you in relationship, or maybe you're coming out of a divorce, or maybe you're coming out of a toxic or abusive relationship. But there comes a point when your mindset has to shift from I am a victim to I am not what happened to me. And I can move forward with my life. And I can become a new person, and I can grow from this, and I can heal from this. And you have to get so intentional about the ways that you will choose to move forward every single day, even when it's hard. Even when it's hard. I tell this to a lot of clients when I'm working with people that until you make the choice to move forward, you won't. You won't. You will stay there. And there's nothing wrong with taking the time to grieve and sit with the emotions and process those things. That is absolutely vital. It is a part of it. But then there comes a point where a choice has to be made. Do I stay here? Do I continually dwell in this pain and this trauma? Do I let it overcome me for the rest of my life? Or do I decide to move forward? To learn the lessons that it has taught me, to learn who I am in spite of it, and to continually grow. And then the final part in that I believe truly changed my entire life was realizing that it wasn't for nothing. That every single thing that I had experienced, every ounce of pain, every trauma, all of the things that happened to me that I didn't deserve, created something in me that changed my life and my perspective and who I believed I was. And when I made the choice to heal anyway, everything changed. And it was from that point on that I realized it was all for a purpose. Then even in the midst of the darkest days that I had, that God was molding me into a person that could help every single person behind me now. And so I took the pain that I had experienced and I asked myself, how can my experience help someone else? What can I do for the person that is just a few steps behind me, or maybe they're, like me, a 15-year-old about to walk into the most abusive experience of their life? How can I help them? How can I guide them? How can I show them who they are and their value and their worth before they have to experience the same kind of pain that I did? I made that choice to take the worst things that happened for me and heal so that I could be a light as God has called us to be, so that I could be a voice for those who were still too scared to speak, so that I could at least be the one example that I didn't have. And though it's not come easily, though it's still a day-by-day process, though there are still days when I question why I'm here, I still come back to that no matter what life looks like, I have made it this far, and I am here to help light the path for others. And that is my call, and that is my purpose. So, acceptance, facing the reality of the ways that you have to change, that's the first step. Sitting with the pain, letting it be, holding yourself and giving yourself grace in the process, letting it change you and mold you, and then finding purpose in whatever has happened to you. That's it. That was my story. That was my journey. And one other thing that I've realized very recently, actually, that I think is so important to understand. For a lot of my healing journey, I was very isolated. I isolated myself because I thought, I have to do this for myself. I have to heal myself. And there are seasons of your life where it is up to you, where you do have to learn who you are in a new way and get to know yourself in a new way so that you can see the truth, right? So that you can learn to love yourself again and remember your value, those moments that are just between you and God, that no one else can fill. But what I also realized is that I stayed in isolation for too long, not because I needed to heal in isolation. I thought I did, but because I was too afraid to put my heart back into the world. I thought I was healing by being alone, but really I was just avoiding more pain. And I say that because I think a lot of people, when they're at their worst, they hide and they become afraid to let anyone back in again. And the truth of the matter is, we're not meant to do life alone. We're not. It is the people in your life that can show up for you with compassion, that believe in you, that can remind you of who you are when you forget. Those are going to be the people that really truly help you navigate your healing. Don't block them out. Don't run away and hide. Don't isolate yourself. That's where the enemy wants you, is isolated and alone. But that's not how God created you. It even says that when God created Adam, that he was not meant to do life alone, and so he created Eve. We are meant to connect. We are meant to be supported. We are meant to uplift each other. We are meant to rebuild in a safe place with other people to hold us on our darkest days. And in the process of that, you can become that too for someone else. But don't harden your heart. Don't become so afraid of the world that you never let anyone in again. Because the places that you were hurt before are going to be the very places that you heal again with safe people, with loving people. And while trust has to be earned, love is what truly heals us. Love is what truly heals us. Love is what truly, truly heals us. Love and safety. And being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to walk towards someone with your fragile heart and say, I don't know how to hold this by myself. And letting that person come into your life and hold it with you until you have the strength. Letting someone come into your life and see you at your worst and say, you're still worthy. You're still valuable. And that is also how you'll know who the right people are. That is also how you'll know who the people are that God has sent into your life. Because they will have the grace for you in those moments. They will make that space for you in those moments. They will be the person that answers their phone at 2 a.m. and takes the call. They will be the person that says, what can I do to be there for you? I wish, and I don't regret it, because I am who I am now because of every season of my life and all of the things I experienced, but I wished I had let people in sooner, because that was when I truly, truly started to heal, was when I started opening the door back up to the loving people who did care. Who am I now? Well, I'm still figuring that out, but I see the ways that I've healed by the ways that I interact with other people, by the boundaries that I hold that I don't feel guilt for anymore, by the triggers that come in my life that I am able to hold and sit with. I went to lunch yesterday with a friend of mine that I met about 2.5 years ago at my first job after my divorce. And she and I were both in a really hard place at that time. And yesterday we met up for the first time in a while. And towards the end of our conversation, she started crying. And she looked at me and she said, I can't believe how much you've changed. You really are healing, and I can see it. And that was such a beautiful reminder that even when we maybe don't see it in ourselves, that it literally exudes from who we are as who we are. God has so much more for you than just pain and trauma. And while these things happen and we can't avoid when bad things happen, God's always, always working it towards for our good. Always. And it grieves his heart too. God is not a God that just brings destruction and pain upon us. That is not how God works. He is the one that pulls us through the hardest times. He is the one that sits with us in those hardest moments. He is the one that reminds us that no matter what you have been through, you are not your trauma. You are my child, and you are valuable, and I have purpose for you still, in spite of it all. And so I encourage you that whatever season of life you're in, that you hold on to the truth that you are here for a reason, that you are meant to be here, and that even the worst of the worst things that have happened to you can be turned into something that changes someone else's life. Don't give up. Don't give in on your hardest days. Let grace cover you and keep going because your story could change so many lives. It's not over for you yet. It's not over for you yet. You were made with purpose. God thought of you and believed that you were meant to be here, and God created you. That alone is all you need to know to remember that you are valuable and worthy, and that your life is not for nothing. So, in your darkest moments, may you be reminded that every single thing you face is leading you down the path to who you're meant to be, down the path to your calling and your purpose. And your life and your story could be the very thing that changes the world. And that's a wrap for today. And this is Where We Heal.